Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. It's news that's nightly about the Redskins. Welcome to the Redskins Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So, the Redskins are officially in Dallas week. It's week 2 of the regular season. Cowboys are coming to town, and this is a pretty big game. Redskins are already 0-1, but more importantly, 0-1 in the division. Can't afford to fall to 0-2 in the division. In a couple of weeks, we travel to the Meadowlands to take on the Giants. That will be a must-win game as well, whether we win this game or not. That will be a game that we probably will need to go and get. But in the meantime, it's Dallas week. Now, Dallas week has lost its luster over the years, but nonetheless, as a die-hard Redskins fan, at our core, the Cowboys are our sworn enemies, our most hated rivals, and it would do nothing but bring joy to our hearts to knock the Cowboys off, give them their first loss of the season, and get back to 500 on the season. Going to take a lot of work on the Redskins' part, correcting mistakes from week 1 in order to get the win against a Cowboys team that looked very, very impressive in week 1, albeit the Giants, who I told you already I think is going to stink this season. Doesn't matter. They still had to go out and execute, and did they ever? They were very impressive. They could have scored 40, maybe even 50 if they wanted to, took their foot off the gas pedal in that football game, but did put up 35 points in impressive fashion, dominating the Giants. Did give up some yards on the ground, but that's Saquon Barkley. That's next level running back play right there. But still, that's something that we need to try to attack if we're the Redskins trying to get a win in Sunday's coming game. However, we're going to jump in knee deep to all of the things that need to be done to get the victory tomorrow. Tomorrow's entire episode will be dedicated on what we need to do to get a win versus the Cowboys and avoid 0-2. I can tell you this as a little bit of a preview as to what you will get tomorrow. The Cowboys have abundance of weapons offensively. They look so sharp offensively. Now again, their offensive line is fully intact. Got their center, Travis Frederick, back. They just gave La'el Collins a new deal. Everything's good along their offensive line. They're healthy. They look good at the running back position. They've got 2 guys that they really like. They got tons of targets to throw the football to now. The most I think Dak Prescott's ever had in his career. Remember last year when we saw those guys in week 7 before the Amari Cooper trade, there wasn't much out there. There was Michael Gallup and a bunch of nobodies essentially at the receiver position. No one to really be afraid of. And after we beat them, remember, they made the trade for Amari Cooper. So they've got weapons everywhere. Gallup, Cooper, both of which went over 100 yards receiving in the beatdown on Sunday over the Giants. They also have Randall Cobb, who had a touchdown grab and was extraordinary for them in that game as well. Jason Witten is back. Not to mention, they have other tight ends that they like. Had another tight end catch a touchdown pass in that football game. They're loaded, okay, are the Cowboys offensively. We know how good their defense can be. Their linebackers are first rate. Tank Lawrence is one of the better edge rushers in all of football. Malik Collins is a really good interior defensive lineman. The list goes on and on and on. We know about Byron Jones and how good he's been for them at the cornerback position. Sometimes I think he's a bit overrated, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is that Cowboys are really good and stout defensively. We've got our work cut out for us. And if we're going to win that football game, there are certain things that the Redskins are going to have to do in order to get the dub. And we'll talk about those things in depth tomorrow. But just know, it is officially Dallas week. The Eagles' loss is officially behind us. And now we must move on. And this is a big one in the NFC East in week number 2. And right out of the gate, 2 straight divisional opponents. I talked about this last week on the show. 3 out of our first 4 games are against divisional foes. we could easily start out this season 0-3 in a division and be dead in the water. Within the first month of the season, if we're not careful, we need to turn things around, and it needs to start on Sunday at FedEx. And we don't know what the crowd turnout is going to be. I've seen some tweets that have spoken to the availability for tickets. Doesn't sound like it's going to be a lot of tickets available, but that's not necessarily a good thing because it could easily be a 60-40, 70-30, dare I say 75-25 split where it's more Cowboy fans than Redskins fans. This game is going to show us just how bad the fan base has eroded at home, because it's one thing to have the Eagles take over in a meaningless Week 17 game when the season's done and nobody cares. That's one thing. In Week 2, when the season's still young, fresh, and new, if Redskin fans don't show up for Cowboys at home, then you know you have a problem on your hands. Because last year, even though we were a much better team in Week 7 last year when we played the Cowboys, doesn't matter. There are a lot of Redskin fans at the game last year, more than the Cowboys. Now, there were a lot of Cowboys fans. Remember, I bought tickets for my dad and my sisters. I chipped in on them going to the game last year. And they told me it was a slew of Cowboys fans, and my dad was one of them in attendance, along with my sister. So, trust me, there were quite a few Cowboys fans in attendance last year, but it was more Redskins fans there than Cowboys fans. Will that be the case this year? I'm anxious to see. I'm anxious to hear what it sounds like on TV. I'm anxious to see what happens 1 o'clock Sunday afternoon at FedEx Field. And another thing, I want us to wear white tops, burgundy bottoms, and force those dirty-ass Cowboys, and I hope it's a hot-ass day. I hope it's 89 degrees on Sunday, so they got to wear those dark-ass navy blue uniforms that they hate wearing. Make them put them shits on. Don't let them come to FedEx Field and get to wear their customary white tops and blue bottoms. Make them put on them dirty-ass navy blue tops that they hate to wear. Make them put them shits on like Joe Gibbs used to do back in the day. Make them wear the shit that they don't want to wear. The Cowboys get to wear those white goddamn tops everywhere they go because most teams wear dark-colored home unis. Not this week. Put the whites on and make those bastards wear the navy blue. And I hope it's hot as shit and the sun soaks up that dark-ass navy blue. That's what you do. But in any event, let's move on to in other news. So, Jay Gruden stepped to the podium today, as I talked about yesterday, that he would every Wednesday before or after practice. You're going to hear from Jay Gruden. And today, we heard from Jay Gruden after practice, heard from Case Keenum prior to practice. We'll talk a little bit about what Case Keenum had to say, but more importantly, what Jay Gruden had to say. And the first thing he addressed when he walked up to the podium were injuries. And so I didn't realize how many injuries. Remember, we just thought it was Darius Guice with the knee injury, Jonathan Allen with the knee injury, and then the re-aggravation of the foot injury for Caleb Brantley. That was it. That was all we thought we walked away from this game with. What we learned today is that Greg Stroman, and I talked about this yesterday, reason why the Redskins released him with the injury designation is because he had a core injury that requires surgery. He's done for the year, so the Redskins released him, and they're probably going to try to have him back, but they had to put him on waivers. So then you look at Monte Nicholson, which I had no clue Monte Nicholson was injured. All right, injured his foot. He's got a foot injury. Did not practice today. Now, don't get carried away. Don't panic. It's Wednesday. If you're going to hold guys out of practice, you do it on Wednesday and possibly limited no practice Thursday. But if he practices on Friday, you should feel good. Generally, if guys are going to play, you'd like them to get some form of practice on Thursday. All right. We've seen players play with no practice on Wednesday or Thursday, but limited on Friday. If he doesn't practice tomorrow, I'll start to be a little bit more worried. And if he doesn't practice at all on Friday, he's not going to play. So what I'm hearing right now is that the Monte Nicholson foot injury, not that serious, but again, it was serious enough for him to be held out of practice today. So we'll keep our eye and ears on that as we see how that situation unfolds. But that's a very scary situation because we don't have much depth at safety. Not the amount and the kind that would make you comfortable. And I know a lot of you are saying, if we would have kept Reeves, we wouldn't have this issue. I understand. I hear you. I think that if we are forced, if we're pressed to put Troy Apke in the game, I think we'll be just fine. I do not want to have to do that, as do you. And so hopefully Monte is fine, but the depth at safety does worry me a bit. And I do not want DeShazer Everett in the game, but I don't mind him in the game. But DeShazer Everett isn't a difference maker. As I've said, we saw the hit that Monte Nicholson put on Dallas Goedert on the sidelines. That is not a hit that DeShazer Everett is capable of. He's not capable of getting there. He doesn't have the speed. As a matter of fact, DeShazer Everett is a guy that misses quite a few tackles. So I would prefer Monte be healthy enough to go. We're already dealing with a slew of injuries this early in the season. I'm already saying to myself, what the hell, man? Now, again, none of these injuries seem that serious, right? Now, I don't want to downplay any injury. Injuries that cause you to miss time are significant enough. But we're 1 week into the season, and we've already got one of our best defensive linemen, if not our best, in Jonathan Allen, most likely going to be out for this game. I know a lot of people are optimistic. Jay Gruden said at the presser that, obviously, I already told you guys, he has a sprained MCL. He's getting a second opinion from outside doctors. To me, that's never a good thing. Because if the first doctors tell you, yo, you're good, generally players run with that. But, hey, if I'm a Redskins player with the negative press that this organization's medical staff has had, I probably would seek a second opinion and maybe even a third as well. But he's seeking a second opinion, Jay Gruden said. They're still holding out hope that he can play this week. If there's anybody that I think could play, it'd be Jonathan Allen. He was really upset that he couldn't come back into the game against Philly. So I wouldn't bet against Allen, but I'm going off of the premise that he's not playing this week. That's why the Redskins went out and signed T.Y. McGill. That's why the Redskins have brought up Trayvon Hester, because those guys are going to have to be in the rotation. And Jay Gruden talked about how, look, right now we got 7 defensive linemen on the roster, and we had to bring 2 guys up. That's why we signed T.Y. McGill, because we were gassed. We had 3 guys in the rotation. All right, Settle, Ioannidis, and Payne. That was it, because we had injuries to both Brantley and to Allen. So we were short. We got 5 guys now. We feel good about the rotation, and we may have to do some things. And this is the thing that the Redskins haven't been good at, making in-game adjustments. Okay, so you're down 2 defensive linemen, and now you've only got 3. Then this was the time for the Redskins to start going to a different alignment. Maybe 2 defensive tackles and 2 edge rushers. Maybe 3 edge rushers and 1 defensive lineman to keep 1 fresh. You see what I'm saying? You know, Kerrigan on the field along with Sweat and Ryan Anderson, who is exceptional versus the run. Maybe you needed to go to that kind of a look to give you a little bit more flexibility with your defensive tackles so that they both wouldn't be on the field getting gashed and opening up huge holes. Instead, they continuously put 2 guys on the field, and they only had 3, so you were always out there with 1 tired defensive lineman, and it was a bad look for the Redskins. Got to make those types of adjustments on the fly, but now the Redskins will have a full complement, not the type of players we're looking for in Trayvon Hester and McGill, but their bodies nonetheless, and at this point, we need bodies, fresh bodies. The fresher we can keep Ioannidis and Payne and Settle, the more effective those guys will be. So he talked about Allen getting a second opinion. That leads me to believe probably not going to play this week. But again, I'm not going to read too much into it because most players get second opinions. And when you're dealing with this organization's medical staff, whether right or wrong, the perception is out there. I don't know if it's the right perception or not. Remember, this is the same training staff that won the Ed Block Courage Award for the best medical staff last season. So I don't really know who to believe. I just know what I know. All right, and I know Colt McCoy had to have multiple surgeries, and the Redskins rushed him back. I know that there's a problem here with Trent. I know there are issues that have cropped up all over the place. So I would err on the side of caution and say that it's probably not a good prognosis for Allen in terms of him playing this week. Anyway, you look at another injury, Caleb Brantley in his foot. I don't anticipate him being back for a couple of weeks with his foot. And so that's a guy that Jay said, don't really look for him, which is why they signed T.Y. McGill. If he was okay, they would just have brought up Hester and they would have kept it moving. But because you've got two guys potentially down on the defensive line, they had to sign McGill and bring both of those guys up in Hester and McGill. So don't look for Caleb Brantley. And then when you get to Darius Geis, he says that Geis is still being evaluated. I don't know what that even means. You're literally 72 hours removed from the game. At this point, you should already have a pretty good sense of what the situation is with Darius Geis. It's a meniscus. He's not playing. For me, Geis is going to be out for at least 2 weeks. That's the way I see it. Minimum 2 weeks. Jay Gruden is still holding out hope. And again, he didn't have to disclose the injury or the severity of it, and nor should he. He should keep teams guessing as to whether Geis is going to suit up, just as he should with Jordan Reed. He talked about Jordan Reed practicing today and how he's still in the concussion protocol, but it was good to see him back on the practice field as he is able to continue his workload and bolster that a bit. You get more and more comfortable and more of a feeling whether he'll play or not. I told you how I feel. The reason they cut ties with J.P. Holtz is because they feel like Jordan's going to play. They thought Jordan was on the cusp of playing last week. So I think they feel like Jordan's going to be able to play this week. So I feel confident that Jay Reed will be back on the field this week, which is a huge boost for this offense. Give the Cowboys something else and someone else they have to account for on this offense. And so I'm looking forward to seeing 86 back on the football field. And then the Monte Nicholson injury, which was a surprise to all of us, or maybe not to you. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know Monte had an injury leaving the game. And so Jay talked about his foot injury and said, look, it's a bit of a foot sprain. Really don't know the severity of it yet. He didn't practice today. We'll monitor him some more. We'll see if he can practice tomorrow, and we'll get a better feel for where he is in our preparation for the week tomorrow. So we're kind of, left in limbo as to whether Monte Nicholson is going to be able to go. And so as I mentioned at the top of the show, already dealing with injuries, and we're only 2 weeks into the season. We're literally one game removed from the start of the season, and we're already dealing with key injuries at multiple positions. Tight end, defensive line, safety, running back. It's crazy. But that's what's been the case with this team over the last, 4 or 5 years running strong now. We haven't been able to stay healthy for whatever reason. It just has been our thing that we can't stay healthy. So that was a lot of what Jay mentioned in the presser. And he also talked about how, the Redskins, Morgan Moses. And so let's talk about that here in a second. And he also talked about the AD situation and how he had to address the team and how he hasn't talked to AD anymore because he already talked to him. So he said, yes, he had to address this situation with the team. He had to allow them to understand what was being done and why it was being done. And hopefully the air has been cleared. Everybody's on the same page in one accord, and we can just move forward. Again, I wanted to dead that issue yesterday. It came up in the presser again today. He had to go ahead and answer some questions. I was more concerned with the Morgan Moses comment because that doesn't help you any when you say, hey, I'm being targeted. This team is being targeted with penalties. I said yesterday, and I meant this yesterday, I'm going to double down on it today. If you're Morgan Moses and you feel like you're being targeted, the league isn't going to change how they feel. And you coming out and saying that verbally to the media is going to make them put an even bigger target on your back. So what you have to do is adjust. You have to be more sound in your principles and your technique. Your hands can't get outside the framework. You have to not be holding. There can't be the slightest tug of fabric. They see it, they're flagging you. All right. So you got to know that once that running back gets outside of you, let go. Whether your guy makes the tackle or not, we much rather have a gain of 5 than a loss of 10. Okay. Let him go. All right. There's no need for the holding. If your hands aren't where they need to be, let him go. Okay. Let him go because they aren't letting these plays go. They're flagging everything. So, and Jay pretty much said the same thing I said yesterday, which is you can't bitch and complain. You just got to fix it. You got to adjust. They're not adjusting, as you can see. They flagged your ass last year. You led the league in holding penalties and false starts combined last year. They're flagging your ass this year. You had a holding penalty and another false start in this game. They're not letting up on your ass. So you have to find a way to make the adjustment. And that's what Jay Gruden essentially said. So Case Keenum stepped to the podium today as well, and he talked about this team and how they're growing and how he's getting more and more comfortable with the players, taking more reps with them, and also getting more and more acclimated to what Jay and Kevin O'Connell are looking for from him in this offense. He said he feels really good about where he is. He loves the targets that he's throwing the football to. He grew up a Cowboys fan. He was a guy that was born and raised in Texas. So he grew up a Cowboys fan. Said he played a couple of his high school playoff games in the old Texas stadium, and says he's really looking forward to going to Dallas and playing against the Cowboys. Going to have a lot of family at the game. They're probably going to be rooting for the Cowboys. Or actually, this game's in D.C., so I'm assuming if he's still the starter when we play the Cowboys the next time, which will be Week 17, I believe we finish up the season at Dallas. I doubt he's the starter then, but nonetheless, a lot of his family are Cowboys fans, and he was talking about that dynamic. But at the end of the day, Case Keenum looked outstanding. Last week, he talked about the misses that he had and how, those are things that come with time. But, that was one of the ones he wishes he had back. But he said going back and watching the film, he was really pleased at what he saw. He praised the offensive line and how they played, which is what we did, most of us did, because, again, if you ask me the two biggest surprises of Week 1, without hesitation, for me, and you know what? If you ask me what two of the three biggest surprises were of Week 1, one would be the play of the offensive line. The other would be the play of the offense in general. The receivers, Case Keenum. I didn't see Case Keenum throwing for 383 touchdowns and no interceptions. I didn't see the wide receivers stepping up and making the plays that they did. We hadn't seen any of that stuff all preseason long. So what would we have had evidence and proof of to let us to believe that we were going to get that? You couldn't have known that was going to take place. Nothing in the preseason led us to believe that we were going to get that kind of performance from the offense. So that was really impressive. But probably the thing I was most surprised with, sandwiched in between. I think the first thing that stuck out was just the offense overall. I was really pleased with what we got out of them. I was taken aback. When we jumped out to the 17-0 lead, I was shocked. So Case Keenum talked about how he wasn't shocked. He felt like these guys had been working towards that all season long, and he was pleased with what he saw on tape. Now they just have to grow and expound upon that. But the thing that I was really shocked about too, which would have been second on my list, was the defense and how poorly they played. Thought we would be better. Thought we would get pressure. We did none of those things. So that was really surprising. And then the third thing would be the left side of the offensive line. So he talked about the line and how they protected. He talked about how Darius Geis protected and when he was in the game. And I was really pleased with his pass pro. I was shocked because, normally with young backs, they struggle in the pass pro department. That touchdown to Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry's 70-yard bomb, Darius Geis stepped up, stuck his nose in there on a blitzing defender, and gave Keenum the time he needed to deliver that football down the field. So he talked about all of those things and then some, and he talked about Jordan Reed and how he's a special player, and getting him back with this offense will change the offense dynamically. So, and Jay mentioned the same thing. He's like, hey, can't really put the game plan in quite yet because we don't know if Jordan's going to play, because there are specific plays you put in on a weekly basis for Jordan Reed that you can't put in for anybody else. No disrespect to any of the other tight ends, but Jordan Reed is a different type of animal. And if he's playing, you put plays in that only Jordan Reed can go out and execute. So that's something to keep your eye on there. I think Jordan's playing this week, though. I feel really confident. Remember, I told you last week I didn't think he was going to play. I think he's going to play this week, just like I don't think Jonathan Allen's going to play this week. And I know that Darius Geis isn't going to play this week, even though Jay Gruden was non-committal on all of those guys, pretty much saying, hey, it's a wait-and-see approach. Those guys are being examined and getting second opinions. We don't know yet. I don't think either of those guys are playing in Allen or Geis. However, I do think that Jordan Reed will play this week. So let's get to the poll question from yesterday, and it reads as follows. Upon further review, what was the most disappointing result during the loss at Philly in week number 1? Was it lack of pass rush, defensive breakdowns and confusion, or lack of an effective run game, ineffective run game? 55 of you, 110 of you voted in general, and I want to first and foremost thank you guys. I know a lot of you have been complaining that there's been issues with you trying to vote. I don't know what those issues might be. Every time someone complains, I go and I check it. I don't have any issues. I've done it from both the mobile site and a desktop. I haven't had any issues whatsoever. But if you guys tell me you're having issues, then you're having issues. And so I appreciate you taking the time and the effort to try and go and vote on the poll. 110 of you voted. However, 55 of you said, so pretty much half of you said lack of pass rush. All right. I agree with that assessment. That's the vote that I would have cast, is lack of pass rush. Pass rush cleans up a lot of deficiencies. You can have guys confused in the back end, and guess what? We would never know it if the pass rush hits home. Now, the coaching staff will know when they go watch film, but we would never know that Jimmy Moreland had no idea what the defensive call was and allowed Deshaun Jackson to run right by him because he had no clue what defense they were in. We would never know that Landon Collins had poor eye discipline and put his fellow safety, Monte Nicholson, in a tough spot between a rock and a hard place, forcing him to choose between damned if you do, damned if you don't. So, again, you get to the quarterback, we would have never known those things existed. Pass rush cleans up a lot of deficiencies. We got to get to the quarterback. Jay Gruden has preached that since the loss. Got to get to the quarterback. Whether it's a 3-man rush or you got to blitz 5 or 6 guys, we got to get to the quarterback. That's inexcusable. I've been saying the same thing for at least 4 years running now. At least 4 years. I wanted an elite rusher. We drafted a guy that we think can be that. We got to turn this guy loose. We got to find ways to, the best coordinators scheme it up. We don't have one of those guys. We're going to have to figure out a way to get to the quarterback, man. But in any event, defensive breakdowns and confusion, 46 of you said that was the reason that you were the most disappointed with the loss in week 1 at Philly. And I can't disagree with that. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's 1A, 1B. And those defensive breakdowns cost the Redskins very, very badly in that loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm right there with you guys on that one as well. And then 9 of you said a lack of ineffective run game was to blame. I don't buy that at all. And when I went back and watched that game again, I was actually surprised at how often Jay tried to run the football. Like, I don't think a lot of you actually in the moment paid attention to some of the things that were happening in the game. You just looked at the stats at the end and said, man, we didn't run it enough. Jay tried to run the football. If you go back and you watch the game, you could argue that Jay tried to run it too much, to be honest with you, especially with the way the pass game was working. He probably should have veered away from it even more so. But that's nor here nor there. Let's move on to today's poll question, which reads, as assuming they can't go in week number 2 versus Dallas, which of these players' absence will be the most, which one will we feel the most, okay? Which one will the team feel the most? Jonathan Allen with the knee injury, Darius Geis with his knee injury, or safety Monte Nicholson with his foot injury? Which of those injuries will the Redskins feel the most if one of those players, or if all of those players, can't go? Which one of those players being out of the lineup will the Redskins miss the most? All right, looking forward to your responses to today's poll question. So, with that being said, that's going to conclude another episode of the Redskins Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. We've got skin in the game. Why? Because we're Redskins fans for life. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Thank you guys for joining me. Tomorrow, we're going to have a big show. We're talking Cowboys tomorrow on the show. And you don't want to miss tomorrow's show. A lot of good information on the matchup at home. Major matchup in the division. Cowboys week 2 should be a lot of fun. We'll chop it up and talk about keys to victory and what it's going to take to come out victorious Sunday, 1 o'clock, FedEx Field, home for the Cowboys. This has been the Redskins Nightly News. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.